Frequently I'm asked, where are your students today? You've been doing this a long time. Are they out there in the world bringing about change? We sure would like to know. And fortunately, many of them keep in touch. And it's so wonderful to get a message, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm in this part of the world, I'm somewhere else. And so from these questions, my board and I came up with the idea this year to invite students, no longer students, but maybe they're always lifelong learners, to come back to Charlotte and talk with us about the work that they're doing today, how they came to be from Charlotte to wherever they are, and enlighten us on the influence of Elie Wiesel and how Echo may have touched their lives. I'm sorry to tell you that one of our panelists has taken ill this afternoon, Justine Treadwell, and I think she's going to be okay, but she's not with us tonight. But I do want to say that Justine is a career diplomat, and Justine, more than anyone else, has helped develop the Footsteps Global Initiative program. Whenever she comes to Charlotte, we meet and she says, oh, you have to do this, you have to go there. You'll love Rwanda, it's so beautiful. Go to the EU mission, that's where I used to work with the embassy there. And she has really inspired and shaped a lot of our work and made great connections for us. So I'm so sorry you can't meet her tonight. But she was here with the students this morning for 2 hours, and it's videotaped. So we hope that you'll get a taste of her thoughts when you watch that. Next, I'd like to introduce Katie Chambly-Ryan. Katie is a trial attorney, civil rights work, and I asked for permission. Katie, you may come on stage now. Yes. Welcome. Thank you. I said, in your program, you'll see a bio of each of the students. And I said, well, you've done so much. I can't remember all that. Do you want me to read that? Or may I tell a story? And after some discussion about what the stories might be, I did get permission and a belief that they trust me. So Katie started as a student intern after her 9th grade year at Myers Park High School. And she did all kinds of things that, a 9th grader would do in an office, learning how to do those things. And gradually, I started seeing her writing. And I said, wow, Katie, you are really excellent at writing. And long story short, she became an intern every year after the 9th grade, the 10th grade, and the 12th grade. After the 11th grade, Katie wrote grant proposals and raised $60,000 for the Echo Foundation. After she went to Swarthmore as a Kohlberg Scholar, she, on the summer program where you could do volunteer work, she went to Otavala, Ecuador, and she was going there to teach English. Well, she arrived, and I get this call, Miss Ansaldo, I'm in Otavala. There are no kids. There's no school. What am I supposed to do here? And she was 17 or 18 years old. And I said, well, Katie, why don't you just sit on the curb? Do you have paper with you? Do you have a pen? Just sit down and start writing, and I bet the children will find you. Sure enough, they did. Katie found them, they found her, started teaching English. She raised money to renovate the dilapidated school, and as a teenager started a U.S. nonprofit, the Village Education Project, where many American students have traveled to teach English to these students. This is what one of our graduates from Charlotte is doing. Paula Queskin, welcome. Thank you. Do you have any idea how exciting this night is for me with these amazing young women? Paula is a documentary filmmaker, and she too said that she trusted me, that the stories would be okay. When Paula came as an intern at Echo, it was after her freshman or sophomore year. And of course, in those days, we didn't have cell phones. And so when our guests, Nobel laureates and Elie Wiesel, would call me, they'd call on the office phone. Well, Paula knew that to speak to this amazing man was a huge honor and responsibility, and her drive to excellence really created this amazing energy. Miss Ansaldo, what do I say to him? If he calls, should I answer it? What shall I say? How fast shall I get you? Shall I put him on hold? And that beautiful energy and desire to do things well was really an inspiration to me. Such a young girl, caring, knowing, understanding, and a thirst for knowing more. That was how I met you, Paula. Since that time, Paula went to Chapel Hill undergrad, studied Spanish in double major, and then decided she wanted to perfect her Spanish and went to Argentina for a year and came back and went to law school at Chapel Hill, ended up in Jerusalem at a law firm, and was assigned a film project. And I'm not sure this is exactly accurate, but my impression is that she fell in love with film more than the law. And so now she is a documentary filmmaker. She has testified before Congress, NATO, and the United Nations. And all of her films are about women's issues and justice. She'll tell you more about that. So with that introduction, I'd like to welcome Carter Payne. It's a pleasure, Carter, to invite you to join me and to introduce Harvey Gantt. Carter and his wife Anne have been friends and supporters of Echo since its inception. Please join me. Thank you. You look so handsome.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good evening. On behalf of Echo, it is my privilege to introduce one of the Carolinas' most courageous political pioneers, as well as the Queen City's finest civic son. A man whose life illustrates seeking and communicating the truth and a drive for positive action. In 1963, he peacefully integrated what was then Clemson College as its first African-American student. Imagine for a moment arriving to university under escort with your lawyer, your pastor, and your father in tow. Forever undeterred, he went on to graduate with honors and later continued his studies at MIT, earning a master's degree. To our city's good fortune, he and his partner founded Gantt Huberman Architects in Charlotte in the early 1970s. His political career soon began in earnest, and it flourished. And in 1983, he was elected and would go on to serve consecutive terms as Charlotte's first African-American mayor. During his time in office and long after, he helped lead, build, and transform our city into the bustling metropolis we enjoy today. In 2009, in part to commemorate his life's achievements and countless contributions to our region, the Harvey B. Gantt Center for African American Arts and Culture was completed and dedicated in his honor. He and his wife, Cindy, have 4 children, and in October, they'll be celebrating 60 years of marriage. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Harvey Gantt.
You know what? Takes an old guy a long time to get himself positioned. Good evening. I'm delighted to be here and to be on this very distinguished panel. And I'm hoping that Justine will be fine and will do quite well. We intended to have 3 people here today. But I'm honored to be with these two young ladies because when I first read their resume and talked to them on the phone, I was saying to myself, my goodness, they are really smart, innovative, creative, and so much involved with the world is making the world a better place. And it's an honor for me to sit here and listen to you all have this conversation we're about to have. And I want to give a shout out to Echo and for the fact that they are alumni of that program, and I hope somewhere during the opportunity that they will do this presentation that they will share with you how Echo shaped a lot of what the substantial things that they have done over these many years. Katie, I think, said to me, I wonder if you're a little uncomfortable that I'm a woman civil rights lawyer. I said,
I did not say that.
I said to her, back when I was trying to get into Clemson, there was a female lawyer by the name of Constance Baker Motley. And she said, what? And then she wanted to know when I went to Clemson. I said, it was well before you were born. But it's good to be on this panel with her. The title of the discussion today is Reinventing Diplomacy. I found that to be an interesting topic, and we shared a little bit in some introductory calls that we had with each other. Reinventing diplomacy. Why? Why do we need to reinvent it? It's been around for a long time. Is there something we're doing wrong? And I thought deeply about that, looked at the lives that they've lived, just heard Stephanie say some wonderful things about the hope being young people reinventing diplomacy. And then I thought about the kind of tension that I wake up every morning with, CNN, Fox, MSNBC. This world is, in a lot of ways, in turmoil, at least for a guy who's north of 80 years old. Read the other day, 600,000 or 700,000 refugees from Sudan trying to find a home. The conflict going on in Israel and the Palestinians, the Ukrainian situation with Russia. And here in the United States of America, we are split almost 50-50. And in 50 days, we're going to make a decision. And I wonder, from what I'm hearing, what will happen to diplomacy. I watch our current president and Secretary of State Blinken make countless trips to the places of conflict around the world. And I can't tell, maybe over time we will be able to tell, whether or not the diplomacy he seeks to have will bring about results that will make this a more peaceful world. What I want to hear tonight from you guys, and I think what this audience wants to hear, are your experiences, origin of those experiences, approaches to diplomacy, or the work that you have been doing, and what your thoughts are. Because I often tell my children, who are about your ages, that this thing is going to be left for you guys to resolve. You ladies to resolve. And I'm just anxious to hear from both you, Paula, and you, Katie, about what's going on. So carry on, and I'll step in every now and then, too.
I'm happy to follow your incredible charge. Good evening. It's really such an honor to be here, and since I was given permission to talk a little bit about my origin story, I just want to say unequivocally that there is no way that I would be where I am today if it weren't for the Echo Foundation. I can say that with complete confidence that being part of this organization when I was 15, 16, 17 years old gave me the confidence, but also the perspective that I never would have had. And when I was about 14, 15 years old, my late grandma Shirley saw an article about Elie Wiesel and the Echo Foundation in the Charlotte Observer, and she cut it out of the newspaper and she handed it to me and she said, "Paula, I think you should get involved with this." And I'm wearing her necklace today in her honor, and I got a little choked up, Stephanie, when you were talking about your conversation with Elie Wiesel, because I do feel that his legacy continues to have a big impact in my life. And the first Nobel laureate that I was able to meet because of you and the work was Harry Wu. And he was standing in Myers Park High School. I was honored to be there. And I tell this story at nearly every speaking engagement that I go to. But we were standing there as high school students, and he pulled down a map of the world, one of those old-fashioned rolling maps. I don't know if they have them anymore. And he was such a slight man with such an incredible presence. And he pulled out a ruler and he banged it against the world map. And he said, "Look at where I was raised." And he pointed to China. This is a country that's restricted on all sides by mountains, by unnavigable rivers. To the northeast, and he would talk about the different communities, and to the southeast, he said it was a closed, cold way to grow up. And then he moved a few inches to his left, and he took the ruler and banged it against the United States. And he said, "Look where you grew up." He said, "Here to the east, you have the beautiful Atlantic Ocean. To the west, you have the Pacific. To the north, you have the wonderful Canadians. To the south, you have the warm Mexicans. You have every opportunity at your fingertips. And what are you going to do about it?" And I will always remember those words. And in that moment, I knew that I would be dedicating my life to human rights. So it is such a profound honor to be here and to carry this on. And I feel so humbled. I said last night, I hope it doesn't mean like I've peaked and this is the end of my career. But it's just such a deep honor to be here, and it was incredibly compelling to be with the students this morning. And so what I would like to say in response to this in terms of diplomacy, I now make my home in Israel, right outside of Tel Aviv. And as you referenced, we have been in the news quite a bit. And one of the things that I think about with diplomacy is the incredible urgency of being connected to our ideals and our values, the ones that Elie Wiesel spoke about and that continue to reverberate, and the ones that Harry Wu gave over to me at such a young age. And these ideals are very simple, but they are critical and invaluable. Ideals of freedom, democracy, equality, and a vision for a better life for all people, and a commitment to humanity. And unfortunately, in the world today, and I cannot impart this strongly in strong enough terms, we are up against ideologies that run counter to that. And so where there is a need for diplomacy and sitting at the table, we always have to understand and recognize who's sitting on the other side of the table from us. And do they share the same commitment to humanity, the same commitment to democracy, the same commitment to freedom? And if they don't, then I really think we need to ask ourselves what kind of shared future we can expect to create with them. Now, I don't think it's hopeless, but I think we have to be very honest with ourselves about the realities that we're all enduring and the different strains of ideologies that are now at war. When I was in college at Chapel Hill, there was a very famous article that came out, The Clash of Civilizations. And I feel like those kinds of conversations are not really being had anymore. There's other conversations about multiculturalism and diversity, and those are very important conversations too. But these things should not distract us from the core of our society and what underpins our society. And so I think it's incredibly urgent and important that we understand who we're engaging with in these conversations and to ensure that we're unabashed in our commitment to these values.
Beautiful. Well said.
Thank you.
Katie.
I'm also so honored to be here tonight. And like Paula, I was a student with Echo, and I was so moved to see people come to Charlotte who had devoted their lives to making the world better than they found it. And I really had not thought about my career in those terms. I thought about it in terms of what I wanted and what I wanted to do and how I wanted to spend my time. And the guest that I remember most vividly was Jeffrey Sachs. And I was so blown away because he was just a normal person. And spending time with someone and just realizing this was just a guy who had made this his career and had improved the lives of so many people. And I really could not get that thought out of my head because I think seeing a living example of someone who does that, it made me constantly think about how to use the things that I was learning to push the ball forward for the values that I cared about. And I'm now a civil rights lawyer, so I've been practicing civil rights law for about 12 years now. I'm at the Department of Justice in the Civil Rights Division. Mandatory disclaimer that I do not speak for the United States government. Not today. But it's been such a privilege to be able to do this work, and I found that if I followed other people who just sort of compelled me forward rather than just kind of think about my own career ladder, it has always been a wonderful guide. And I think what Echo's done is really brought these people in front of students to show them a living example of how you can actually make a path and bring a moral dimension to the work that you do. And in terms of your question, I think there are a lot of enormous challenges, and I definitely have days where I'm really down about it. And I think everyone I know, and I shared this with the students today, everyone I know who works in public service or who's a change maker, and I'm sure you as mayor of Charlotte, I think no matter how much power you amass and how many things you appear to be doing, you wonder whether you're actually moving the ball forward at all and whether you're really making a difference. When I started my career, I represented people on death row in Georgia and Alabama, and we had some incredible experiences. One of them was that I represented a man who had intellectual disability. He was a black man who, when he was a teenager, was convicted and sentenced to death for the murder of a white woman. The prosecution struck all of the white jurors, or all the black jurors rather, and he was tried in front of a white jury. Now, in their notes, the prosecutor had actually highlighted all the black jurors in green, and they'd written B next to them. And there was a note that said, if it comes down to having to pick a black juror, this one might be okay. And yet they argued that this was not racial discrimination. Now, you're not allowed to do that, to strike all the jurors because they're black and try someone before an all-white jury. And so I had the distinction of writing a cert petition, which is a request for the court to hear your case, to the Georgia Supreme Court, and I lost that. They found it had no arguable merit, and so we brought it to the U.S. Supreme Court, who found it had quite a bit of merit, and in a 7-1 opinion, we won that case. And when I remember, we'll never forget walking back onto death row, and in Georgia, all of the men on death row will wait for their lawyers in just one room, and all of them standing up and applauding for us. But shortly after that, we were having conversations with our client about taking a plea to a life sentence so that he wouldn't get sentenced to death again. And that was really, really sad because this is somebody who had done something truly terrible, but when he was a very young man, had grown up in shocking conditions, and whose life was so challenging that when I wrote the first briefs in his case, I'm dead inside now, but I found it difficult to describe what he'd been through. And now I've done that over and over again for many people. And so, I found it really challenging to kind of believe in the change of the work. And then I went on to sort of address more systemic issues, and now I work on for police department. Well, I work on behalf of the United States government to address police departments where there's a pattern or practice of unconstitutional conduct. But there's so much optimism if we look at where we are from a historical perspective. And so I'll just share one small story about that that I think of a lot. So my husband his family is from Poland, and his grandmother is a wonderful person who grew up in Warsaw during the Holocaust. And her father was actually a train conductor who gave food to Jews who were in the ghetto there. And he was arrested and then murdered in Auschwitz for that. In Poland, the penalty for helping any Jewish person was death. And then her family, she and her mother, continued to hide Jewish people in their home. They had 8 Jewish people hiding in their home throughout the war. And they survived. They were actually sent to concentration camps themselves, and the Jewish people kept hiding in their home while they were gone, and they all survived the war. And when I took the job investigating police, and I was put on the case investigating Minneapolis after the murder of George Floyd, she and her friend said to me, well, aren't you scared to investigate and challenge the police? And I thought, no, I'm not scared at all. And the reason for that is because of the civil rights and protections that we have in this country. It is truly amazing that without any fear, I can investigate the police. I can get in a police car with an officer who knows I'm investigating their department and will drive me around and let me watch what he does without any fear of retribution because of the protections that our Constitution provides. And it's really led me to believe, I mean, my whole career has led me to believe that those constitutional rights, even when they fall short, are just incredibly strong and incredibly powerful and need to be protected above all else, beyond political disagreements, beyond, any other value, that we have to sort of keep the foundations of our democracy strong. And I think the fact that those exist here in this country always give me a lot of hope that we have room to move forward. Because we have the architecture to make a better world here.
But how do you totally eliminate the fear out there that motivates a lot of what we do? I'll give you an example of that. I was reading an article on the rise of authoritarian government around the world. And the fact that lots of people just want to be left alone. If they can have a job, they can afford to buy a loaf of bread, if they can send their kids to a reasonable school, they really don't care about anything else happening around them. And authoritarianists do well to get into office and continue to take more control of their lives. You're talking about our Constitution and the wonderful things that have been planted there and how much those freedoms protect us. But they also, there's another side to that where people just don't want to be bothered. They just want to be left alone. They don't want to get into some situation such as a war and losing their children and whatever. And so they want somebody strong that can protect them. And they fear outside interventions that will turn their lives upside down. And that ultimately, I think, can breed a certain kind of indifference that can be very damaging and affect the ability for us to talk to each other. Because I think, a new kind of diplomacy is a personal diplomacy that says, I can talk to you, and we can work out our problems, and we can see how we can move everybody forward in an atmosphere of freedom. And that's not always the case. Does that make sense to you? what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think what I'm hearing is a concern for the rise of authoritarianism around the world, and
And how it affects, I think, diplomacy and
yes.
tolerance and,
Yeah.
people who have a view of, well, let's put it this way, leaders who take advantage of fear. F-E-A-R, fear. And they know that the natural human instinct is, I'm not going to worry too much about John 3 doors down if I'm protected and I'm okay. And then soon John's not 3 doors down, John is right in your front yard.
Right.
Simply because you are turning a blind eye to what's going on because of authoritarianism.
So I'm sure that happens, but I'm going to talk about people for whom that's not the experience, because I think you're absolutely right. There is a rise in authoritarianism, but I think that there's also many more strands and movements of protest that we're not aware of, which I'd like to shine a light on. As Stephanie mentioned, I founded and run an organization called the 49%, which is a women's rights organization dedicated to telling the world's most urgent women's rights stories. And we do that using film and media. And, excuse me, a lot of the women that we work with are in very repressive regimes. And I've had the pleasure and really the honor to work with women in many parts of the world. And most recently, I've done a lot of work in Afghanistan and with women in Afghanistan. And I think that whereas there are folks that are just keeping their head down, we have so much to learn from the stories of Afghan women whose bravery is truly astonishing. After the Taliban came back to power, one of the first things they did was eradicate rights for women. And these were rights that women had enjoyed for 20 years, ever since the United States and other world powers were part of the governing bodies there. And girls past the age of grade 6 were not allowed to go to school and still are not allowed to go to school. 2 weeks ago, there was another directive that said that women cannot be seen with their faces shown in public. And so now women have to walk around with a full burqa. They're not allowed to look or talk to men. Then there's Iran, which is next door. And the IRGC is the International Revolutionary Guard there. I like to make a distinction between Iran and the people of Iran and the leadership of Iran, which is very important. And so the leadership of Iran right now is, I don't have enough words to describe them, but probably one of the worst actors in our world today, and the actors that we should be the most concerned with. They're not representative of the people, and throughout the last many decades, there have been time and time and time again popular uprisings of individuals who have bravely fought for their human rights and dignity. Most recently, 2 years ago with Gina Mahsa Amini, who was a young woman who was brutally murdered for not wearing her headscarf appropriately. And that set off protests throughout Iran and actually throughout the world. And so I do believe that there are incredible strands of protest movements that are happening all the time. Like I said, I work with women in Afghanistan who we're constantly trying to connect them with the outside world. There's underground schools that are taking place. There's tech companies that are trying to connect with Afghan women via Zoom. And of course, every woman that's involved with this is risking her life. In terms of the diaspora, the Iranian diaspora, and what they're trying to do to support the protest movements, I think that in every single country, right now in Venezuela, there's incredible heroism and courage that we're seeing as the dictator has now won, allegedly, the election, which we know was false. And so we do see these strands, and I think it's up to us and deeply essential that we continue to highlight and support these movements. And I think that's the charge of our generation. We have so many tools at our disposal to be able to not be indifferent and to really lift up these voices and to continuously shine a light. And so while I do think, of course, there's fear, for every example of fear, there's many, many examples of courage. And because we are so privileged to live in free societies, we constantly need to be reaching out and holding the hands of those who are seeking for change in these places.
Although I will say, I've had the same experience as Paula here in the United States, because one thing about our constitutional rights is that democracy is do it yourself. And if people aren't protecting it in certain communities and there aren't people to represent it, it's like you don't have any rights. One of my mentors used to say there are certain parts of the highway where they could put a sign that says Constitution stops here. And it's really true. I've been to communities where everyone is operating as if rights do not exist. Here's how it happens. Somebody with power, maybe a police department or a prosecutor's office or someone else in the government, starts doing something they shouldn't be doing. But maybe you have a town of people who are poor, don't have access to any lawyers. So who's going to raise it? What court's going to hear it? And if you go to court, you might have an elected judge. In some parts of our country, judges do not even have to have law degrees. So this might just be an elected person who's close friends with the people in power who are abusing that power. And it's able to continue on and on and on, things that you would not believe are happening. People left in jail because someone forgot to let them out after their charges were dismissed. I've seen that many times in my career. And yet I've seen a lot of people standing up for themselves in really incredible ways. And there was one really heroic woman that I had the privilege of working with. This is someone, she was one of the most financially poor people I had ever represented. When I went to her home, it's empty, mattress on the floor, no electricity, and she lives in New Orleans. The New Orleans district attorney, at one point, Leon Canizero and his office, decided that they would like more access to witnesses for the prosecution. Now, there is a way to do this in the law, but you have to file a motion in the court. And of course, then the defense would know who it was you were trying to talk to so badly. And they might be able to ask whether they talked to you or not and what they said. Now, that's not always so great for the prosecutor's side because then you get to ask if they said something maybe that didn't quite help the state's case. So what they did is they started using these fake subpoenas, a piece of paper that they printed out. They wrote subpoena on the top. They said, this orders you to come to the DA's office for an interview with me on threat of jail. They were completely made up. This went on for decades before an investigative journalist unearthed it. And then we brought a lawsuit. And one of my clients was this woman named Miss Bayham, who was just extremely poor and had gotten one of these fake subpoenas. Now, as the case went on, I had lots and lots of clients in the case, and several of them settled as the case went on because a plaintiff in a lawsuit has to go through a lot. And these are people without any slack in the system, but they have to appear, on a random day for an 8-hour deposition. I mean, think what a pain that would be for you. I mean, I've had a client in another case appear for an 8-hour deposition who has incredible chronic pain and severe diabetes, requiring dialysis, and yet she was able to sit for this. So it takes real heroism. But no matter how many demands they made of Miss Bayham, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, I mean, money that was probably unimaginable to her. She probably never had that much at one time in her life. She kept turning it down. She would not take it until they agreed to reforms, a settlement that included reforms. And if she can be that selfless and brave, I think we all can. The place I have seen the most apathy isn't usually in the people who've suffered abuses. A lot of times it's people who are comfortable but really busy in their lives and going from one thing to another. And I really understand that as a mom. I feel like I don't have any time to think half the time. And when I do, when I kids go to bed, my brain is so fried and it's just like Baby Shark, playing in repeat. It's hard to think about anything. And you also just sort of feel like you're just living your day-to-day life and you forget your immediate power that you have in sort of everyday situations. But I think it's really critical to remember that you're a moral actor in the world, and to think pretty regularly, like, what am I doing to make sure democracy's protected and to make sure the world's better than when I found it? And a lot of people's excuse, I think, is sort of, the world is so messed up. I mean, I'm not going to solve Israel-Palestine right now. And no, you're not, but you can take one step. And I think sort of thinking about it in that incremental way is really helpful. So the other day I made some get out the vote calls during my son's nap. But I hope everyone will sort of think like that, you know, any contribution you can make is really valuable and really critical. And everyone has a role to play.
Beautiful. I don't know why a back fence came into my mind. And personal diplomacy is on my mind. I see a citizen go down before the school board and argue that their child is being hurt by the teaching of critical race theory. But I don't see enough people trying to get with that parent who have a differing view and see whether we can't work out some understanding, whether we can be diplomatic with each other, but share our feelings. Diplomacy, the highest level of it is your ability to go in and share the values and the feelings of your country, your nation, your neighborhood. But you also have to be good at listening to the opposing view. And what we don't have enough of are conversations across the back fence with a neighbor who might have a differing view. Why? Because there's fear. Again, I keep bringing that up. Fear keeps us from trying to be diplomatic, trying to find out what bugs them, what causes them to take the position they take, and being open to the fact that they might ask why you are taking the position you're taking, and then trying to work towards some kind of solution. I'm hoping we can raise more of our kids to be willing to listen, when they see wrong, to speak out against it, not be paralyzed by fear, but also be willing to hear the other side. You get to do it in a courtroom with a judge, and you present your case the best way you can. You get to do it by your documentaries, and you're working with the 49% Project and trying to open people's eyes to it, but being willing to hear the other side and then argue for what you think is right. I see a lot of people moving, so it tells me that. Is there any final thing that you want to say to this audience?
I don't want to say a final thing. I have a lot more to say.
They're telling us we were out of town.
Oh, wow, that was quick. I think I heard something very powerful the other day, which was that some of the most egregious actors in the world right now, Russia, Iran, North Korea, what have you, they're thinking in empires. They're thinking in centuries. And here in the United States, and probably even in France and England, we're thinking in election cycles. And I think that's to our detriment. There's this emphasis on quick, instant gratification. There's an emphasis on getting ahead very quickly, or until, to beat out the other guy for the next race, for the next opportunity. And I'm just wondering if that's something that is holding us back as a society in the most basic terms, in our families, in our communities, in our cities. But also I'm very concerned of how that's impacting us on the global stage. And I think if there is one thing, there's many things, I love what you said, that we can take away, it's what is the long view? What is the future view? How are we all working together to imagine a future where our values and our traditions continue to be forefront in the world? And so I love that you brought up the idea of fear, because we don't have time for that. we don't have the luxury of fear. We don't have the luxury of indifference. The problems of our world are too urgent, and we have too much privilege and opportunity to let that stop us. So I would charge all of us that regardless of who we're voting for in this election cycle, we need to think about how we want the United States, how we want the Western world, how we want democracy to exist beyond the 21st century. That's the way that we should be thinking and making choices and innovating continuously.
Thank you.
I'll just say, so you mentioned I argue in a courtroom. I don't only argue for my job, although I do enjoy it. But it's actually even more important to build relationships with the other side. I mean, especially, I'm in the business of making system change. And you can't just do that within tech. You have to actually get people to be willing to invest in changing their systems. And what I've been really heartened by is, not in all situations, but in a lot of situations, and it's certainly with most people that you meet. People will have different factual beliefs about the world, but a lot of times you can come together on people's values. So when somebody comes before a board and expresses something about critical race theory, maybe their fear is going to be that their child is going to feel ashamed or marginalized or something. And I guess what I would say to them is that my education about civil rights and Black history is the most empowering thing that ever happened to me, and showed me how much power and privilege I have in the world, and has given me a beautiful career full of meaning, and a way to inspire my own kids and be part of a global and historical journey towards justice. And so I think if you sort of speak to the values that people are coming from, you're often able to move the ball forward. And so that's where I hope people will find common ground.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We can't let you leave without a thank you. What an outstanding opportunity you have given to us by coming here and speaking with us. I think we all are very inspired and would love to hear a lot more. So just keep doing the good work you're doing. Paula, thank you. Thank you. Katie, thank you so much. This is for you. Yes, thank you. And Harvey, I believe you had the most difficult challenge of the evening, sitting with these two women, trying to figure out what to say about them. And thank you so much for the example that you are for all of us, and for being here tonight and moderating our panel. Thank you. Thank you.